became books Unprecedented, the Constitutional Challenge to Obamacare, which he wrote in 2013, and Unraveled, Obamacare, Religious Liberty and Executive Power. So Josh knows the Obamacare area well. He's going to give us a good grounding, and I'm going to learn a tremendous amount from him. Josh, thank you.
Thank you. Now, how much time do I have? Those are questions. Good, right answer. Well, thank you all so much. Coming to this reminds me why I went to law school and not medical school. The sight of that little child's, lawyers know, that little child's stain and the thing on the finger, I have no idea what that was, but maybe one of you will be kind enough to explain it to me later. You all are in the business of providing medical services and diagnosing cures for diseases. My profession is a little bit different. I diagnose problems in the law, and specifically when laws run afoul of the Constitution. Now, most of your interest in the Affordable Care Act stems from how it impacts your practice, how it impacts your business. My talk will be a little bit different. How did this law come into effect? What were the obstacles of the law's implementation? And the million-dollar question, what on earth happens next? Right? So we begin our story long before 2009, but where healthcare reform largely began, which was in the early 90s. When I showed this picture to my law students, they have no idea what this is a picture of. They don't. They have absolutely no conception of what this was. Now, who knows what this is a picture of? What is it? Hillary Care. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, right? In fact, there's chicken on the menu. This was the beginning of healthcare reform in the United States. In 1993, President Clinton anointed his wife, Hillary Rodham Clinton, the First Lady, to chair a task force to reform healthcare law. Her proposal was, in effect, universal healthcare. It wasn't quite single payer, but it guaranteed that virtually every American would now have access to health insurance. Did this come into law? No. Why not? Here's the next trivia question. Who here remembers what this is a picture of? This is the harder one. Ooh. TV commercial of what? Against Hillary Care. This was the Harry and Louise. Remember that? I was barely alive, so you know, this should be a few guys. This was the Harry and Louise series of commercials where you had a ma and pa sitting at a table at home saying, wow, I don't want this new healthcare law. I like my doctor, all of you, and I want to keep my doctor. As a result of this commercial series, the healthcare law fell apart and the popularity plummeted, right? And this commercial teaches an important lesson about healthcare economics. You can't have everything. When you're dealing with insurance, you can have three things. I'll give you two of them. It can be affordable, it can be comprehensive, or it can be accessible. You can have two of those, you can't have all three. If you want it to be cheap, it won't be very good. If you want it to be accessible to everyone, it's not going to be cheap. And I'll tell you what, they're going to cut back on what is covered. Now, this isn't a basic tenet of economics that anyone should understand. But when the Affordable Care Act was being sold in 2009, there was a simple promise that was made over and over and over again to put people at ease, that they wouldn't lose what they had. And this promise we've heard it so many times: if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Okay, here we go. Now we're getting some play-by-play. Good. The reason why this promise was so important to tell was that to put people in a state of calm, that they could support this healthcare law without losing what they have. So what comes next? In 2009, the bill comes up in the Senate. The Democrats at the time had 60 votes, which means they could beat any filibuster. And the law was known as the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2010. Now, the bill was nearly 3,000 pages, No one actually read the bill. That would have taken too much time, although in fairness, the Republicans have used similar tactics in recent months to pass bills that no one bothered to read. On December 24th of 2009, the Senate passed their health care bill. December 24th, 2009. About 2 weeks later, in Massachusetts, a special election was held to fill the seat of Ted Kennedy, who had passed away over the summer. That election went to a Republican, Scott Brown, who won election. But the reason why Scott Brown's election was so important was he was the 41st Republican. And with that, the Republicans could break the law, they could filibuster. So now the Democrats are faced with a dilemma. The dilemma was this: if they tried to send the bill back to the Senate for another vote, the Republicans would filibuster it and kill the bill. So instead, the Democrats chose Plan B. Even though the Senate bill was only a draft, it was never meant to be final. They said, we'll vote on it anyway. We'll simply vote on what the Senate did, make a few small changes that weren't very significant, and put this into law. So my friends, the law which we have today that affects 15% of the United States economy, that impacts all of your practices, is a draft. It was a rough draft that was never meant to be final. Now, I'll give you a very easy example. As the law stands now, states have the option of creating an exchange or not. Texas didn't create it. The version the House wanted would have had a single federal exchange nationwide. That never went into effect because it simply passed whatever they had. On March 23rd of 2010, you had the fatal vote where the ACA was signed into law. I want you to focus on this number here. If I move it quickly enough, I can make it 0. It was a straight party line vote, which at the time was unprecedented. You never had a law of this stature, of this magnitude to pass without a single vote of the opposing party. Give me any law: Social Security, Americans with Disabilities Act, Medicare, Medicaid, all had bipartisan support. So when you see the recent Republican vote, or straight party line vote, this was born of that. The current gridlock we have for healthcare reform stems directly from this decision to go it alone. No matter. The bill goes to the White House, President Obama signs it into law, and you see he's smiling, he's like, I won, right? Healthcare reform is settled law. Not so fast. Having failed to kill the law in the legislative process, the next step in the battle goes on to the courts. Specifically the argument that the Affordable Care Act, and specifically the law's individual mandate, was unconstitutional. What is the argument? Can the government make you buy insurance? Can the government make you buy health care? This was the subject of my first book, which you should all buy. There's a second book as well. The first book was called Unprecedented: The Constitutional Challenge to Obamacare. And the book can be summed up in a single vegetable: broccoli, which I do not eat anymore. I was already lectured by one of my table mates about eating too quickly. No broccoli. Can the government make you buy broccoli, right? If everyone bought broccoli, maybe they'll eat it. And if they eat broccoli, they'll be healthier. And if people are healthier, healthcare costs will come down. Flawless logic, right? But does the federal government have the power to make you buy that broccoli in the first place? Certainly if you're buying broccoli, they can set standards of health and safety, maybe set how much you can pay for it, but can they make you get off your couch, go down to H-E-B, and buy a crown of broccoli? So this case goes to the Supreme Court in a decision called NFIB versus Sibelius, National Federation of Independent Business versus Sibelius. And in a decision that breaks my heart every year that I teach it, the court, the Chief Justice, did the unthinkable. So he first held that no, Congress cannot make you buy broccoli, they cannot make you buy insurance, but, and here comes the but, they can tax you for going uninsured. Now let's get this straight, folks, right? They can't make you buy insurance, but if you go uninsured, they put a tax on you. What is the difference? I have no idea. I've been teaching this now for 8 years. I still have no idea what this means. But with this, the Chief Justice saved the law. And with that, the ACA survived its first brush with death. There will be several. Next, it went back to the political process, where Mitt Romney, the Republican nominee for president, said, "I will repeal and replace Obamacare." That slogan's been around forever. Did he have any prospect of repealing and replacing Obamacare? Of course not. Indeed, as governor of Massachusetts, Romney had basically created Obamacare. He created the law. He was the one who said that all people in Massachusetts should buy insurance. During the debate, President Obama said that Romney was the godfather of Obamacare. He was right. With that, President Obama won re-election in 2012. The Chief Justice swore him into office. Now, I want to jump ahead because I've abbreviated time to the next major political battle over Obamacare, which of course began right here in Texas. After the ACA was enacted, I thought that after the Supreme Court upheld the law, I thought that the movement to shut down Obamacare repeal would more or less fade. Okay, Romney lost the election, Republicans would fall into line. Not so fast, because our senator, our dear Houstonian, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, began his crusade. He was on the platform of defunding Obamacare. And if anyone watched cable news at any point in the summer of 2013, and I'm sure there's some junkies in the room, you will remember these commercials. Remember these? Wall to wall, defund Obamacare, stop it, stop it, stop it. This movement culminated in Senator Cruz speaking on the Senate floor for nearly 25 hours. It wasn't exactly a filibuster. A filibuster means you talk till you can't talk anymore. Cruz had to stop at a certain point to the vote schedule, but he spoke for 25 hours straight. Maybe you guys do surgery for 25 hours. I can't do anything for an hour or two. That's my upper limit. So this is a remarkable feat of strength. In fact, he read his daughters, Caroline and Catherine, a Dr. Seuss book as a bedtime story from the Senate floor. So here he is at the beginning. He looks kind of well kept. By the next day, his tie is down, he's looking a little bit haggard. He emerges victorious and begins his presidential campaign. Oh wait, close enough. But what was the result of this decision? Shutdown. Because Republicans and President Obama could not come to a compromise of any sort about what to do with this healthcare law and what to do with everything else, no budget was enacted, and we shut down. Now in Texas, when the government shuts down, no one really notices. But in Washington, D.C., they notice. Perhaps the most visible manifestation of this shutdown was the World War II Memorial in D.C. There's a service called Honor Flight where they take these veterans of World War II, they fly them to D.C., they show them the memorial in their honor. It's a wonderful service. I had signed my grandpa for it, but didn't quite get it in time. It's a great service. So you can imagine what happens when a bunch of World War II vets show up at the memorial and it's closed. Now, how do you close an open-air memorial? I don't exactly know, but they closed it. So what did the vets do? If the shores of Normandy could not stop them, some stupid barricades would not stop them either. So they picked up the barricades, carried them across the streets of the White House, and dropped them at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Good for them. But all good things must come to an end, and Republicans did what they always do, they caved. And given time, the Republicans funded the government in its entirety, raised the debt limit, and let Obamacare go on as before. This is a story that you'll hear throughout the rest of this presentation, unless Dr. Goldberg stops me. So what happens next? While the government shutdown was ongoing, something was lurking in the background. What was it? A website. Now, I'm sure all of your practices, you have websites where people come in, maybe they sign up for appointments. It's not that hard to build, a few $1,000 here or there. The government spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the website, healthcare.gov. Did the website work? No! In fact, it was more like a nightmare. See this one? Ready? 1, 2. See, someone can diagnose the twitching in their eyes, maybe. I don't know if anyone can get that. But it was indeed a nightmare, right? After spending all this money, the website didn't work. And for a brief period, the government simply considered scrapping Obamacare for a year. Because if people could not sign up for health insurance, they would be stuck with paying a penalty. President Obama, though, had a different idea. He called in the nerds. I mentioned Normandy a moment ago. We have the tech surge, right, where you bring in the nerds. Now, let's put this into perspective. We're talking about 5 or 6 engineers from Google and Facebook did what the entire federal government couldn't do in 2.5 years. It's remarkable. President Obama promised that the website would be ready by Thanksgiving of 2013, and fingers crossed. And indeed, it worked well enough. Not perfectly, but it worked enough that people could register and get health insurance coverage. But that only covered up the next major scandal. I remember I said at the outset, if you like your plan, you keep your plan. This was a promise that could never actually be kept. The reason why is because the Affordable Care Act says we only want people buying insurance that meets a certain level of quality. If it doesn't meet that level of quality, you can't have it. As a result, millions of Americans received letters like this that said your policy is now canceled because of the health care law. So much for the promise that you can keep your plan. But you can buy a new plan, whether you like it or not, on this wonderful website that can work occasionally. Indeed, President Obama's promise was dubbed the lie of the year. I know that was the thing, that you can have a lie of the year. Politicians tell them so often, but this was the winner of all. No matter, once plans were canceled, people were forced to enroll. They went down to the local Obamacare store. I don't know where this store is. I want to look it up one time. Where's your local Obamacare store? But eventually, 8 million people signed up. Now, I want to give you a brief cautionary note on numbers. The fact that 8 million people signed up, you'll appreciate this, right? The fact that 8 million people signed up does not mean that 8 million people paid their bills. So one of the unfortunate, or perhaps fortunate, byproducts of the healthcare law is that people can sign up for coverage, get treatment, drop their coverage, and never pay their bills. Now, the way this so-called adverse selection is supposed to be covered is to say you can only register in a certain period, right, 2 or 3 months out of the year. But in order to get these numbers padded as high as possible, the government let people sign up whenever they wanted. They said basically anything was a hardship. If you even said, I'm not feeling well, hardship exception, right? My favorite one, if you had your utilities disconnected, that's a hardship exception. You can sign up for insurance whenever you want. So basically you tell the electric company, turn off my utilities, sign up for insurance, turn it on the next day, you're covered, and you never pay your bill. So I think the people in this room, perhaps more than others, will appreciate that. And by the way, you can't collect from these people after they drop the coverage. And they'll just sign up again next year for a new plan. So this was the first and second major political battles within the Affordable Care Act. I want to wrap up my time here by talking about my newest book and also what happens next. So every time I give this talk, it seems to have a different flavor. When I gave this talk in mid to late 2016, when it looked like Hillary Clinton would win, I say, well, here Obamacare is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And then when President Trump was elected in November, I said, well, look, Republicans control both houses of Congress. Obamacare is not long for this world. And then when I started giving this talk in early 2017, I said, well, maybe it won't be repealed right away, but by the summer, Obamacare will be gone. Okay. So if any of you have been paying attention to the news in recent weeks, you'll know that there has not been any effort by the Senate to actually pass a bill that can do something about Obamacare. The House of Representatives passed a bill that no one really liked. It wouldn't have done much good. And they basically passed it for the sole purpose that the Senate can start their process. But the Senate, with 52 Republicans, has been unable to get a single bill to clear through it. Senators McCain, Senators Collins, Senator Murkowski, and several others have said that we are not supporting this health care law. And with that, you cannot get to 50 plus 1 for Vice President Pence. Now, I'll give you a little secret. McCain was the profile encourager voting no. He gave cover to a lot of people who really didn't want to vote no, right? A lot of people knew McCain was not voting yes. They just, they let McCain stand up and be proud. But a lot of other people did not want to do it. So where does this leave us, right? Where does this leave us? I think it's very unlikely the Republicans will get any bill to clear 51 votes. A couple of the Republicans in the Senate are probably going to be Democrats by the next election. They may even switch parties. So that's not going to happen. So now the onus falls to President Trump and his administration. President Trump has said, let it implode, let it unravel, as the title of my book suggests, right? The executive branch can take a lot of action, several steps, to actually assist, or maybe nudge, if you will, the law to implode. President Trump seems to think that by allowing the law to implode, all the blame will fall to Democrats because this is Obamacare and their law. Not so fast. If indeed President Trump takes actions that sabotage the law, I think the harm will fall to the detriment of Republicans. So we're in this weird place where Republicans still insist they want to repeal and replace Obamacare, but they don't really mean it. Even the bills they suggest would leave most of Obamacare in its place. That much is settled. But what is not settled is whether the law is stable enough to survive. And on its own, without any influence by the Trump administration, the law isn't quite on stable footing. Now, let's talk about the winners and losers. If you are a poor person on Medicaid, this law is good for you. If you have some sort of pre-existing condition and you weren't able to get insurance at an affordable rate, this law is good for you. For a lot of other people, it's not so good. The winners of the law are very visible and they're very vocal. The losers of the law are not. They're the people who have increased premiums, reduced network sizes, higher deductibles, higher co-pays, etc. Those people aren't as visible because all you care about is how many millions of people will lose insurance. In this respect, I think that President Obama was victorious by making people firmly believe that health care is a function of the government and that there's basically a right to health insurance. The debate has changed. In polling today, a majority of Americans think that health insurance is the most important issue facing us, more than terrorism, more than the economy. And that is a cultural shift that did not happen overnight. That was not the stage in 2009 and 2010, but that is the stage now. So the only question in my mind is whether the Republicans cave, as they usually do, and say, okay, let's try to not repeal Obamacare, but bolster it and strengthen it, which is what I suspect we will see. The word often used is stabilize. We need to stabilize the law. Stabilize means throw lots of money at it and putting more patches in a sinking ship. But that's more or less where I suspect this is headed. I'll wrap up here and note that much of this is largely uncertain. No one knows exactly what President Trump will do. I don't think maybe he even knows what he's going to do. But the decision he makes will in large measure define the future of healthcare reform and figure out whether we're stuck with Obamacare or Trumpcare. Thank you all so much for your attention, and I welcome any questions you may have. Don't be shy. I know you have questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
The FQHCs, are you familiar with that term? Federally Qualified Health Centers? Okay, well, all right. Well, they were taking care of uninsured patients. They were started under President Johnson and doubled under President Bush, George W. Bush. And under the Obamacare administration, federally qualified health centers, which there are over 1,400 in the United States, they were turned into just sign-up centers for Obamacare, basically. And they still took care of patients, but basically they were just turned into sign-up centers. And so we need to understand that there will always be the uninsured. I mean, even if you have Obamacare, there are always going to be patients who don't have insurance. We know that. So what about those patients? I mean, it's an illusion to think that they're going to be always, that we can have enough money to have insurance for everybody, and comprehensive insurance at that. So I'd like to know what you think about that. And then I also want to know, is it Medicaid that's killing those 6 or 7 Senate votes? Is it just Medicaid? Or is it also the concern about abortion? Because that's the unstated problem that people are not talking about.
Thank you, and I'll try to answer all those questions, perhaps not in the same order. So the first question is a philosophical one. Should people be given health insurance or health care? They're not the same thing, right? For a lot of people, health care, perhaps in the form of a clinic or one of these centers, is a lot more useful than health insurance. The second one is, what sort of care are people on Medicaid getting? You have insurance, but it's crap. It's not very good, and doesn't cover much, and it's very thrifty. So giving people these thrifty policies isn't always as good practice as having community health centers. Now, I'm not familiar with the ones you mentioned.
No, they're the same thing.
Yeah, so the second part of the question is, what's preventing this bill from passing? One, Medicaid. Under the Affordable Care Act, the federal government threw lots of money at states to expand the number of people who are eligible for Medicaid, basically raising it from at the poverty line to at roughly 133% of the poverty line. Many states with Republican governors accepted this money. Texas did not. If the Affordable Care Act, as the House designed it, if the House bill had gone forward, that money would be scaled back, and states would potentially lose funding. Once you give an entitlement, it's really, really hard to scale it back, especially when you say this millions number of people have it and take it away. The other issue that was mentioned is abortion. This is not unstated, it's quite stated. Efforts to defund Planned Parenthood and other things that were put into this bill killed the votes of Senators Murkowski of Alaska and Senators Collins of Maine. It's possible that they put these provisions in because they knew those two would not back the bill anyway. So it's like, what do we have to lose? But when you have 52 senators and you lose 2, that's all you can afford to lose. And once McCain signaled his discontent, that was the ballgame. Other questions? Yes, sir.
When does the Medicaid funding of the federal government go away for states?
Never. The question was, when does the Medicaid funding for the states go away? It never goes away in its entirety, but it does scale back a little bit. So I think by 2020, states are down to 90-something%. So a lot of the states that accepted the money will start getting less in a couple of years. And that will be put on their own taxpayers' backs to make up the shortfall. Texas has not accepted that money. I think at some point probably will. They'll probably get with the package. To use an example, if you live in Texarkana and you're on the Arkansas side and you make a certain income, you are eligible for Medicaid. And if you cross the street and you live on the Texas side with the exact same income, you are not eligible for Medicaid. And I think eventually even Texas will cave on that point. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Why did McCain vote against it?
Why did John McCain vote against it? Maybe you can ask him. I don't know. I think his objection was largely procedural. I don't think he was happy with the fact that this bill was voted on without anyone having time to read it. There were no hearings, there were no meaningful debates. It was rammed through. So I think there's a procedural aspect to his vote. he hasn't voiced any substantive objections. Maybe I don't know what he thinks about it. Arizona did accept the Medicaid expansion, so that could be part of it. But I think he was standing on principle to fight for the decorum of the Senate. Other questions? Yes, sir, in the back. Last question. Leonard getting antsy.
I've been coming to use the therapy since 1983. Normally, it is customary for use in dermatological to acknowledge your conflict of interest. And I will never come back to another use in dermatology.
Thank you. Anyone else? Here's for that. Well, I appreciate the interest and the attendance. I'm glad the attendance stayed mostly the same. One departed. I have a wonderful time speaking to all of you, and I'm grateful for the invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Great talk. I've been promised that food is coming out within the next 3 minutes. That was 5 minutes ago.